So here's the official Randy Biswell welcome words. Happy day to you. Hey, whether you're joining us on the live or on the replay, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, your time, we want to welcome you to this week's episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. This broadcast is sponsored by our company, CVC Success Group, and the host of this are our coaching team, which includes Cheryl Eisenhower, Josh Kelly, Randy Biswell, and myself, Jerry Eisenhower. And the whole mission of this show every week is we want to bring on a guest when we have someone that we feel can offer value to our listeners. And this week is no different because the other week this young lady spoke at the NCSG convention at the Mexican Sun convention. And I actually was not in her room, but I get this text from Randy while this is going on. And she said, Lauren is knocking it out of the park up here on the second floor. And then when it was over with, she said, we got to have Lauren as a guest. So, Lauren, our guest today is Lauren Turnbuck. I hope I pronounced Turnock.
Turnock.
Turnock. And she resides in Virginia Beach, and she is a remote employee and works with Rooftop Chimney Sweeps, which I believe has an office out of Alexandria, Virginia, which is in the Washington, D.C. market area. And they also have an operation in Richmond, Virginia. And at one time, they did have an office there in Chesapeake, but whenever they stopped that particular office, they retained the services of Lauren because undoubtedly she's a super person with all the responsibilities I'm understanding she has with the Rooftop Chimney Sweeps there. So, Lauren, let's share with folks, tell them a little bit about your background and how you got in the world of chimneys and vents.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me as a guest. I'm really excited to share my thoughts. So I started working for Rooftop about 3.5 years ago. Before that, I had been working for an IT company. I had a slew of roles there. I started as the receptionist, answering phones. We didn't get a lot of calls, but people occasionally did, and I ordered lunch for people and went and got that. And that was my job to just finish out college. I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish school and I'm going to move on to something else. Within, I think, a month or so, though, they needed somebody to fill a procurement role, which I was like, that at the time for me was like a big word. And I was like, I'm not really even sure what that means and what they do, but all right, sign me up. It was definitely a bit of a scary leap. I think I was probably 22 at the time. Like I said, I was still finishing college, and I felt like I was being given this like grown-up job and didn't really feel like I should be. But hey, they asked me, so I did it. I did that for, I think, about 2 years with them, and then they needed help with inside sales. So I moved on to that, and that mostly consisted of building quotes, working with customers to get them what they needed, processing orders over to procurement for them to place with our vendors. And I really enjoyed that. It was super fast moving, fun, as fun as work was at the time. It was fun. And within, I think, probably 2 years, they were looking for a manager to oversee that team. I had no management experience. I had been with the company for probably about 5 or so years at that time. But people that I worked with encouraged me to apply. This was the first time I was having to apply and go through the interview process. Previously, they were just like, hey, you like doing inside sales? All right, it's yours. But I had to apply and go through the interview process, and I was up against somebody who in my mind was way more qualified. He had management experience. He was, a little bit older, had more relevant job experience probably, and had his master's in business. And, I did not. So I didn't really think I was going to get it, but I was like, all right, good learning, opportunity if I don't. But I did get it. And so I took that on, and I did that for the last few years that I was there before the company was bought out. And at that time, the company that came in was a big corporate company. And they, it just wasn't aligning with what I was looking for. I had been really happy with the previous company. I'd been there for 8 years at that point, and things were just changing. And I was like, you know what, maybe it's time to pivot and look for something else. So that gets me to Chimney World and how I kind of got involved. So I was looking on Indeed for similar roles, operations management, since that was basically what I had been doing the last few years with my current company. And I saw an ad posted by Rooftop Chimney Sweeps. And the thing that really spoke to me was how much they emphasized their culture and how they valued culture over things like direct chimney experience. They had linked to a Forbes article that they had done a couple years back where the brothers had been interviewed about what it takes to basically keep a good employee, and how sometimes when you have to say goodbye to a really good employee, it can be a good thing. And I just was really super excited about that. It seemed like all of their culture values aligned with mine. So I applied and I went through the interview process, and they picked me, which kind of blew my mind at the time, because again, it was one of those probably imposter syndrome things where it's like, are you sure you think that I'm the right person to do this? But it ended up being fantastic. I started off as an operations manager for them in Chesapeake in December of 2019. And unfortunately, within a couple months, COVID happened and things very rapidly changed. I ended up taking on a different role probably in April 2020. We called it, what did we call it? Resources. And what we determined that was anything that was a company resource, be it employees or technology or tools or vehicles. And so I started overseeing things like all of our fleet, all of our ordering, all of our HR that was sort of non-existent, which was a fun learning experience. Hiring got moved into my bucket. And then from there, it just kind of grew over the last few years. But yeah, I guess that's kind of how I got involved. I feel like I maybe stumbled into it, but I'm super happy I did.
Well, the title and what I promoted this today is a session on how to become a rock star performer. And undoubtedly, the Raycroft brothers, as I'm going to call them, and their dad recognize your abilities to be this rock star performer. And you've moved up into this company in a very dramatic way, into a very, very much key leadership role in what you're doing today. So anyway, I'm going to go to Brandy for the first question today, because Brandy she watched your seminar, and knowing Brandy, she has her notes in front of her. She comes in here very well prepared. She's ready to rock and roll. So she's one of our rock stars. So Brandy, let's rock and roll with what your first question is.
Yeah. So Lauren, tell us, what is your college degree in then?
It's in sport management with a fitness and wellness track.
So nothing to do with what you're doing now.
No. And actually, I mentioned in my seminar that I wish somebody gave this advice to me after I was done with college, but I wish I had it beforehand. They said, I really tell kids, going to school now, just pick something you're interested in. Unless you're going to do something very specialized, right? Unless you want to be a doctor or a nurse or a lawyer or something where you have to go a specific track, right? If you don't know what you want to do with your life, just pick what you're most interested in, because that will probably end up being very valuable. You'll enjoy what you're learning about, which means you might be a little bit more dedicated to seeing it through. And I wish I'd had that, because I think while I was in school, people say, I put it in my seminar as well, but the people say this joke to my face. They're like, oh, a lot of people go to college for 7 years. They're called doctors. I'm not a doctor. I have one degree. I have my bachelor's degree, but I went for 7 years full time because I kept changing my mind. I did early childhood education before I realized I didn't I have children, but I didn't have children at the time. I realized that small children were not for me. So then I moved to music education. I moved to music theory. I moved to English. I moved to psychology. And finally I was like, I just got to get this done. I cannot keep doing this. Actually, I think the government was kind of like, you can't take any more, you're done. You cannot take any more loans or anything. You got to finish this degree. So I had a counselor too at the community college I think I was at the time. She was like, yeah, you have enough credits to graduate, just not with any specific degree, which we don't allow. So you have to pick. So I somehow settled on sport management. I think it was a combination of a couple things. I was very interested in health and wellness at the time. I still am, but I was definitely, that was my main mindset. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I was interested in learning about it. So I picked that. And then I had also found, this was right when like online school was popping up, and I had found a really great school in Pennsylvania that was going to offer this course online. And I was like, this is perfect for me because I hate going to class and lectures. I would miss them. I would go to like the if they required you to go to 10 out of 12 classes, that's what I did. Like I went to whatever was required. But I loved the online aspect because I could kind of teach myself and watch the lectures on my own time in my bed if I wanted to. So yeah, it worked out.
Very
but nothing
good.
to do with anything now.
And that was kind of like the segue into my kind of second question. Jerry knows I can't ever just ask like one thing.
I love it.
It's very unusual for somebody to stay with a job. You mentioned your first job, you were the 8 years, and then now you've been at your current position for like 3 years. You know, we know the average employee now stays 1 to 2 years, 3 tops, and then they're moving on. It's further rare that somebody would be promoted into such great management roles with such responsibility without having that experience. What are the traits that you think that you bring to the job that have led you to be put in these very senior positions?
They're very similar to a golden retriever, super low, which is of course a joke, but I consider myself super loyal. And as long as I'm working for a company that is supporting me and encouraging me, I'm going to be very, very loyal in return. So that is one key piece of it. Another part is definitely that I love being able to work on different things. So because, I worked at that job for 8 years, and yeah, that is a long time. And like I said, I was kind of planning on staying there forever, but it was so rapidly evolving that like every 2 to 3 years, I basically had a new job. And so that kept my brain super excited and engaged because I was constantly being able to learn new things. And the same thing has happened at Rooftop. Like my role has just kept evolving and changing very rapidly. And so I get to just work on different things all the time. As far as, being promoted into higher level management experiences, maybe without the direct experience, that's been a surprise to me too. Or I should say it was a surprise to me. I mentioned imposter syndrome earlier. I constantly felt like the people making the decisions were just like I was tricking them maybe, or like they didn't know. I was getting lucky, kind of all of those things. But in hindsight, I can look back and I can see all the ways that I've contributed with to both of these companies. How I always went above and beyond. How I was never the person to sit there and be like, well, my work's done for the day, I'm gonna like go scroll through Facebook. Even when I was at the front desk, I was constantly just like trying to find more stuff to do so that I could help out and be a part. Probably because a lot of it was I did not want to be bored. I was like, I just can't sit and stare at the clock for 2 more hours. I need to be busy. But yeah, I think I constantly was trying to find ways to kind of raise my hand and say, hey, what else can I do?
I have a feeling the brothers of the company are going to be very upset with us when this is over, because I have a feeling you're going to be getting people calling you, offering you a job.
Well, it's possible, but like I mentioned, I'm super loyal, so they've been super good to me.
Well, it's evident that you followed you have a natural progression. I could see your degree working right into the chimney business, just like Randy's nursing background.
Mm-hmm.
It was a natural progression. A lot of times I'll find somebody working in the office and I'll say, hey, what'd you do before this? Well, I worked in a daycare center. Okay, you're perfect for what's going on here because your job's going to be somewhat of a similar nature. So Josh, you're up next. What would be the first question you would ask Lauren today?
So what I know, you guys have operations between 2 and 3 geographical areas that are several hundred miles apart. What are some of the challenges with managing a workforce that's so far apart?
Yeah, that has been super challenging for us. I started, I think, oh gosh, let me think. I think I started about a year after they had opened Richmond. And then, like I said, they had hired me to kind of be somebody to be a, operations manager for Chesapeake, the new location that they were taking on. Um, I think probably the biggest challenge is when the Raycrofts had just, the one location in Alexandria, they built this really, really cool, awesome culture. They had lots of great training that they had developed, not just technical training, but they had a whole unit on culture. And so basically when employees were hired, they would come in and they would do this multi-day culture training to kind of go over like our core values, our why, our mission. Even it would go to stuff with like interacting with coworkers and how to ask for what you need with your manager. So they had developed all this really cool stuff, and it was easy to keep an eye on it and make sure that that culture was existing in Alexandria. When they opened the Richmond location, they sent down a couple of really great guys to kind of help oversee. They ended up moving, to Richmond. They were kind of overseeing that location. They hired some people to come in as well. And it was doing okay. It was running, and it was mostly a startup, right? So it was all that fun stuff that comes with basically starting a new business out of nowhere. And then with Chesapeake, that opened just over a year later, and that exacerbated the challenge of ensuring that your culture is staying in place at each location when you're not physically there. So like Richmond wasn't too far away. They had people that had come from Alexandria, so it was a little bit easier to maintain. But with Chesapeake, it was completely different. Different employees, different type of business, and there was a lot of unique challenges that came with that, and trying to ensure that the culture was being translated over. I think then with COVID, it became even more of a challenge, because I think at first the intent when they purchased Chesapeake was, all right, we'll come down, there'll be boots on the ground, like we'll be interacting, that type of thing. But then that couldn't be done. Like they weren't able to do that. And so I think that is probably the biggest challenge with having those three locations and two now. It's still a challenge, is making sure that your culture, which is like, to me, is the core of your business. It's like it's the biggest, it's the foundation. And without that, everything else can crumble. And so making sure that culture is existing is a huge challenge. And I think the way that they've been able to overcome it is, in Richmond, about almost 2 years ago now, they hired a great guy, David Secor. He's kind of the operations manager, not just in Richmond, but he also is the operations manager over Alexandria as well. He has managers there that report to him. But he has been able to maintain that culture. They found somebody that values were aligned, right? Values were aligned, and they could come in and they could make it happen. Obviously, there's a lot of operational challenges as well with resources and that type of thing. And I see a lot of that because I'm, quote, like corporate, and I oversee, I'm hands in the middle of both locations. But I really do think the biggest challenge is getting that culture to just be what you want it to be when you can't physically be there as the business owner.
Yeah. Josh, does that answer your question, brother?
It sort of.
Yeah.
Well, wait, sort of, if it doesn't completely.
I have a follow-up question. As a self-proclaimed HR nightmare employee, how do you?
Love it.
Because Jerry will tell you, especially 10 years ago, I was a little bit more hot-headed. How do you? Like I said, I never enjoyed getting, especially when I worked at the bank, I never enjoyed that phone call from the HR. Like, how are you interacting with all the employees remotely, and then making sure that they have the information they need just to succeed? Really just, hey, what is our time off policy? Things like that, the information that they need, that remote workers, they don't have a physical handbook.
Yeah. So that, it definitely is, a bit of a challenge, but over the last, and I promise you that, I I love all of our employees, and if they're listening, some of them will be like, yeah, we don't always get what we need when we need it. But they know that it is a bit of a challenge because I'm not physically on site. But we've been able to implement, a lot of things like we switched to a different payroll system last year. And one that I was doing the research on it to kind of pick which one we should go with. And one of the big things for me was like, I need something that is not just a payroll system, but is an HR platform, because I cannot keep up with all of the demand that these 50 some employees need on a regular basis. And so we switched to Zenefits last year, and they have a great HR platform. And a lot of the things like that, like the time off policies and other company type documents like that, we were able to like roll them into Zenefits, and it's very seamless now. When somebody starts, they can it just goes out to them. But as far as other things like interacting with them, we do a lot of stuff over email, phone calls, text messaging, all that stuff. But I really make an effort to go up to the other offices when I can. And I have 2 small children, so it can be a little bit of a challenge. But I was in Alexandria this week, and I was talking to a couple of the technicians, and they were like, oh, where do you live? Do you live in Richmond? I was like, no, I live in Virginia Beach. And they were like, what? Why are you even here? What are you doing? Like, that's a long drive. And I was like, I'm here to see you guys. And they were just like, no, really, like, why are you here? I'm like, no, I miss you guys. Like, I miss interacting with humans, and I enjoy the people I work with. And I'm literally here to see you guys, and like whatever else I can do while I'm here is great. But, so I try to also physically go up there so that they know me, and I'm not just like some person sending them an email. I hate that. Like, I want people to know me. I think I'm a nice, funny person. So I want people to like me.
Yeah. So from what, so people are aware, when she talks about the 3 operations, the one in Alexandria, that's the original one. That was started by Andy Raycroft, probably close to maybe more than 40 years ago.
1978.
1978. So Josh, same time that your parents started. And
I still have a coupon of Andy's from the 80s. It says a suite for $49. I sent a picture of him, and I expect him to honor it because it has
no. Sorry, I oversee finance, and that's not going to happen. So
there's no expiration date on that coupon.
Yeah.
Andy.
Okay. So anyway, what I was saying is we have one that's been there for many, many years that made a definite transition when Andy's 2 sons came in and started running the operation, when Andy basically turned the reins over to them. Then you had the Richmond operation. The Richmond operation was a startup operation. And then the Chesapeake operation, that was an operation that had been in business over 40 years that they purchased. So then you had to absorb the existing employees and integrate them into the rooftop culture. So what you had there was 3 distinctly different companies that had distinctly different issues of integrating it together, which I'm sure was a difficulty. So Cheryl, you're up next. What will be your first question from Lauren from what you've heard so far?
Well, we were talking before we came on live about values, and I'm sure you have to hold yours high to run 3 from off-site. I would be pulling my hair out. I thought I was running a stupid thing here. But, so I'm sure some days it's kind of like there's just not enough time in the day to play with all your balls that you've got to play with.
Yeah.
So, your values are extremely high. How do you hold your company to the same value? Companies, excuse me.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think I'm one of those people that I really try and lead by example. And I try to be as genuine and authentic as possible as well, so that people can see that and can see that hopefully my goal is that they see that and that it comes across as like relatable. But it is a challenge, especially when we had the 3 locations that, like Jerry said, it was basically like 3 different businesses. It really was. And it's been a little bit easier keeping Richmond and Alexandria aligned, but I think I really try to be empathetic with people, and so that they know that I care. And I think that for me, that distinctly aligns with my values, because when I feel cared for and when I feel like somebody is being empathetic and understanding, that's when I'm going to be putting my best foot forward. So I try to show people the same in hopes that they see that and they're like, okay, because you're right. Like I'm very busy. I do a lot of stuff. And I think probably there's been times where people are like, what exactly is Lauren doing? Like, what is her job? I know I sometimes wonder that myself, but I think, the longer I've been around and the longer I've been working with employees, they've been able to see like, okay, wow, she does a lot. And so, they show me kind of the same amount of like patience with maybe like, of course, they would love to get something faster back from me, but they know and they gently maybe follow up and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I really try to lead by example and show people. And as much as I can, whenever I'm in front of employees, I try to remind them, especially since I recently like took over the finances and kind of overseeing and handling a lot with that what every employee puts into the business is what they'll get back in return. And what I mean by that is if you have somebody who is neglectful with taking care of their tools or, drops their iPad off the roof or any number, or, even stuff like gets a speeding ticket, all of that stuff costs money. And one of my values is, again, I want to be in a good spot. I want to be like taken care of and provided for in that, like with the employer that I'm working for, like I need money. I need to be, I need to pay my bills, that type of thing. Like I want to be valued, but I also want, to be paid. And so I try and remind people that like we're a small business. And so all of that stuff adds up. And like the more that they can, do stuff like take care of your tools or like maybe pay attention to what the speed limit is, like that money can be invested back into them. And so I guess I try and live my values, but I also try and just remind people how it works. I think a lot of times people think, oh, well, businesses, like there's just this like endless supply of money, and like there's really not. But the more that you're, responsible and you're, like I said, putting into the business everything that you can, like that stuff's going to come back to you. And that's just my personal belief with the businesses that I've worked for, because I've seen it.
Yeah. So, Cheryl, does that answer your question? Okay, so Lauren, here's my question to you. Mm-hmm. You are a type of employee that we are seeing increasing in popularity. This was actually driven very heavily because of the COVID issue, where we started having remote employees and remote members of their team. And by being remote, what it means is people can go outside of their general market area and can add people to the team. So I have a two-phone question. How does the remote employee, how do they provide the most value? And on the other side of the coin, the supervisor of that remote employee, the company, how does that person make this a successful relationship? Because like I said, we have people that are working remotely. In fact, we have some that are in Mexico that are working remotely for clients in the United States as CSRs. So that's a twofold question. What does the employee do to make it a successful relationship? And what does the employer do to make it a successful relationship?
Yeah, those are great questions. So I did not start off as a remote employee. And when I was hired with Rooftop, it was pre-COVID, just barely. So it wasn't really fully a thing yet. Like you said, it kind of like exploded, obviously, with COVID. But the biggest thing that I think is, all right, it's a couple things. So I've been seeing this thing lately, I'm sure everybody else has, about like quiet quitting, right? Where you basically just give the bare minimum of what you need to do for your job, and that's it. And I mentioned in my seminar that like quiet quitting actually makes me really sad, because to me, if that's where your mind is, then you're not working with the right company, because your values in some way are misaligned with them, and you think that's all you should be doing. So to me, I would, if that's how I was feeling, I'd be like, I need a different job, because doing the bare minimum is just, to me, it's not okay. But so I think that, you have to not have that mindset of like, well, I've done the work that's been asked of me and I got my 40 hours of work done in 8 hours, so now I get the rest of this time back. Like that's not how it works. That's great that you're that efficient, but like that just shows me like there's more you can be doing. And I think it's so important, especially when you're working for a small business, that like you find ways to give more back if you're able to. Because again, I think that the more you put into it, the more that you'll receive back. And I do think that that is probably a niche mostly. I don't know. This might not be true. This might just be my opinion, but it's a niche with it's true with small businesses, because they can only do so much, right? They don't have all the resources available that big corporate companies do. So I feel like I could be more understanding about like maybe putting in the bare minimum and only doing what's asked of you if you're working for like this big corporate conglomerate that doesn't care about you and you're just a number and they're underpaying you and overworking, okay, like maybe, but again, that then your values aren't aligned. You need to find a different job. You need to not work for a big corporate conglomerate and you need to find something different. That's how I know that like I always want to work in the small business world, because that's where I'm most happy. It's where I can feel that I'm contributing, where I can feel that I'm adding value, where I can feel that I'm cared for, on a personal level and not just as an employee number. So like for me, I'll probably never, ever go work for a big corporate company. It's not for me. So first half of your question, as far as, ensuring that, how do you make it work as a remote employee? You have to, it's so simple. Like you have to do your work. You have to do your work and be working when you're supposed to be working. And like, if you're done with your work, you need to be reaching out to your supervisor and say, hey, I'm done. Like, what else can you do? What else can you put on my plate? I think there's a great thing with remote working, flexibility, right? You might have a little bit more flexibility. That's awesome. But like flexibility does not mean I'm going to sit on the beach and like monitor my emails just to make sure nothing crazy pops up. That is not working. That's what I call monitoring. Flexibility is stuff like, all right, I'm going to take 10 minutes to go switch my laundry because I haven't really stood up in a couple hours. And then I'm going to come back and I'll, get back to it. Like that to me, that stuff is acceptable. But yeah, you have to, you got to actually work. That's probably the biggest thing. And I think it's been a real challenge, post-COVID, especially on the employer and manager side, kind of making sure that stuff's happening. So the second half of your question, which, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been kind of talking a lot, but it was, how does the employer also make it, a successful?
How does the employer make this successful relationship? And so you'll know, and I know that Randy's paying a lot of acute attention, because this is one of the challenges we have, which is making sure that this is a successful relationship out there. So I'm sure Brandy's taking some good notes over what you're saying right now.
Yeah, I think it's important to, first of all, you have to set them up for success by making sure they have what they need, right? Like, do they have their computer? Do they have their second monitor so that they don't have to go back and forth between, different pages? Do they have an external keyboard or a keyboard and a mouse? Like that stuff makes your job easier when you're working off of a laptop. Headset, all that stuff. So the first thing is like, you got to make sure they have like the physical tools that they need to be remotely successful for their job. After that, I think you have to be committed to having a regular cadence with them and checking in, and ensuring that they're A, doing what they're supposed to be doing, but B, that they also just don't need other things from you. And you have to put a little bit more effort into it than somebody you see every day. And so, when we were looking at closing the Chesapeake office, something that really meant so much to me was that Tristan, one of the brothers, I report directly to him, he called me and he's basically said to me, like, look, like we've been talking about considering doing this, but it's really important to me that, if we do this, what does that mean for you? Like, are you going to stay with us, or like, is this going to cause you to leave because you don't have an office to go to? Because he knew that I value working in person and interacting with people and my coworkers. He knew how important that was and how much it means for me to be able to go in each day and see people face to face. And his concern was like, if we close this and she doesn't have an office to go to anymore, like, does this mean we're going to lose her? And like, that was such a huge thing to me, because it showed that he knew what was important to me, and he wanted to make sure that making this big decision would not lead to me leaving because I was no longer working in a situation where I was happy. So I think that's important to really, you got to know your employees, know what they value and what's important to them, and constantly be looking for ways that you can help and add to that so you can keep them around.
Gotcha. So what I just heard from you saying, to make this successful, number one, we have to equip that person. Means we got to train them. We got to equip them with the tools, the other things that we need. But the second thing I heard is we have to communicate with that people. We have to lay out our expectations. We have to, track and measure that the results are happening. And if they're not, then we've got to have the communication and see what the problems are. You just brought an important thing up, which is some people cannot function in an office alone. Now, actually, the four of us that are on here, all four of us probably get more done when we're alone than we do when we're around a bunch of people, because all of us are sitting in home offices right now and not around a bunch of people. But Brandy, question for you. Did that help you in understanding possibly giving people guidance?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then is it time for my next question?
It is. I'm going to you next. I was just going to say, first thing was I wanted to see if you grasped the value of what she just said and how we could use that. But then it was going to be, okay, Brandy, what's your next question?
In your presentation, you said, be a goldfish. Tell us what you mean by that.
Okay, I wish I could take credit for that, but I stole it from Ted Lasso, which I literally was watching it last night. The new episode, it's probably my favorite show right now. But there's a scene in the first season where one of the players kind of messes up and he's kind of struggling with some confidence issues, and the coach Ted Lasso pulls him over and it's like, hey, do you know what the happiest animal on earth is? And the guy's like, no. He's like, it's a goldfish. You know why? He's like, no, because it has a 10-second memory. Be a goldfish. And the kid kind of is like, all right, and runs away. But I love that scene. And it's something that I've tried to keep at the forefront of my mind and remind people that I work with. But, even for myself, you're going to make mistakes. We're all humans. We're not robots doing this job yet. AI is not, completely taken over yet, but we're all humans, and mistakes are going to happen. And you have to, first of all, take accountability for those mistakes when they do happen. Second of all, you have to have the mindset of all right, I have to be a goldfish here and move on and not let this sit with me and obsess over it and keep going over, well, what if I had done this? What if I had done that? And that's been something I've really personally struggled with. The guys I work with, they'll tell you I can be a little obsessive, especially when it comes to getting things perfectly right or making mistakes. And I probably drive them crazy a lot of the time. But yeah, I've been known to kind of dwell on my mistakes, and you can't, because the thing is, growth comes when you make those mistakes, right? So we mentioned how we had 3 separate operations. The Chesapeake office, we had to close it. That was a failure, right? That sucks. Sorry, to be frank. It does. It's a really bad feeling to have to be here's this 40 plus year old business that we wanted to kind of take over and integrate into our business, and we didn't succeed at that, and it really was a bad feeling. And luckily, the guys I work for, the Raycrofts, they're great, and they felt really awful about it. I can promise you, and I can promise you, it wasn't an easy decision. But they have tried to take it in stride as okay, what did we learn from this? Well, we learned that maybe it's not a good idea to purchase a business only a year after we have this organic startup that's still not fully running on its own and needs a lot of help as well. What else did we learn? We learned that it's hard to integrate, culture across different companies when you're geographically 4 hours away or whatever it is. There are a lot of lessons that we've taken from that we're going to use moving forward. And while it's an awful feeling and nobody was happy about it, and we all still sometimes are we feel sad that this happened, we're trying to take the lessons that we can learn and move forward and keep the business going. So I think that's the big thing about being a goldfish. Don't forget your mistakes and just be then keep making them over and over again. That's not the point. But the point is don't let it sit with you and let it become this thing that prevents you from moving forward and being better.
I agree 100%. And when you're in Kansas City in 2 weeks, you know that Ted Lasso, the real actor, is from Kansas City. So I can take you to some of his favorite places. In fact, my daughter was just at a party with his family last week.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I asked if he was in town and if he was there, and she's like, I don't know, Mom. I don't know if he was there or not.
Lauren, what you just said takes me to the classic advice of Dr. John Maxwell, which says, when you fail forward. So what I'm hearing here is that was a failure. Nobody buys a business and expects it to shut down within just a couple years. Same time, I always told Jim Brewer, buddy, you were lucky you sold this at just the right time before COVID hit. Let's face it,
Yep.
it was tough years right in there for a lot of companies. But that's the whole thing. From what you're telling me, part of the culture of Rooftop is we learn from our failures and we fail forward. Would that be an adequate description of what you just said?
Absolutely. And like, failure is encouraged, I think. So one of our core values is act like you own it, which to me is take accountability and act like you own what's going on. And so when you make those mistakes, you do have to be accountable for them. But yeah, you fail forward. Like, that's how you learn. That's how you grow. And I've made mistakes at Rooftop. I've made worse and bigger mistakes at my last company, but like, I've made mistakes at Rooftop that have made me I felt really crappy. And I'm always encouraged to like, all right, this stinks, but like, let's move on. Like, let's take what we can from this and like, let's keep going. We're not going to let this keep us down.
Yeah, got you covered. Okay, so Josh, up to you for the next question, my friend.
I didn't have any more questions.
Okay. Well, we're just going to let you learn from our questions. But now but I got a question for you, Lauren, before we go further, before you start interacting with Cheryl. Have you ever done a DISC assessment in your life?
I have. I've done it a couple times, actually.
So tell us where you're high. Well, first, we're all running through our minds. I know where I'm thinking you are. And Cheryl, so tell us what was your high on your DISC.
Okay. So S. So green, high S. Yep, I am. And I've taken it a couple times, and it was so funny because I took it at ABS, which was the first company I worked for. And then years later, when I started at Rooftop, I took it again. And I was like, I've changed so much. Like, I have grown. This is going to be so different. And then literally I compared them side to side, and they were like basically exactly the same. And the only thing that had changed was like the work style had gone up as like for D, like, because I'm a high S, like that does not come naturally to me. And so that had increased a little bit. So that was good, but like not as much as I was hoping. So that was awesome. But yeah, I'm high S. And then the next one is I for me. And then it kind of just goes to C, and then D is the lowest.
Yeah. And so you'll know, I don't know if you noticed or not, but Cheryl was a DISC assessor. So actually, I was running through my mind. It's like, okay, I'm sitting here, listen, be honest with you. I was guessing an I. Cheryl, what was your thoughts? What was your thoughts listening to Lauren?
I knew she had a high S because of some of the things that she's doing, but I knew that I was sitting right up there with it.
Yeah.
So it had to be one or the other. Right.
So the interesting thing here, like I said, is being able to see that, and that's something to understand about other people's personalities. So Cheryl, it's your turn. What's the next question you would ask?
Well, I was going to the DISC, but I'll move to something else.
Well, go ahead. No, go ahead and ask the question.
I was going to ask her what she thought she was and go that way. But anyway, found that out. We know where we're at there. So I'm going to take it down to a personal note. You have 2 small children. You have to allocate X amount of hours to work, and you have a high family value. So do you, just for the ladies that are actually out there doing what you're doing, or gentlemen, excuse me, nowadays we have both genders working that field, but do you literally closely try to set a clock time, or is it just, do you just run way like I do, way too many hours over?
Yeah, I do try really hard, and I wish that I could say that I am one of those people that I won't, open my computer once the kids are home and that type of thing. I have to make a conscious effort not because I don't want to be present with my children and I don't love them and adore them, but I'm not great at splitting and being able to turn it off, right? I'm not able to just be like, okay, it's 5 o'clock, like I'm done. My brain is still going. So I think, it's a couple things. One thing that's been helpful for me is actually having a timer and like having it go off when it's time for me to be done. Sometimes that timer might not be the one on my phone. It might be the kids opening the door and be like, "Mommy!" But and then I try when it is my time with them in the evenings, on the weekends, being really as present as I can with them during those moments. But it is really hard, and I think that I'm fortunate in that I have a very supportive husband. He also works and has a demanding job, but his is a little bit easier to turn off at sometimes. And so he's really supportive in allowing me when I'm like, look, I have to get this done for this thing tomorrow, or like, this can't wait. He's like, all right, like, go ahead. Like, I got it. I got everything under control. And I think that that's been really, really great for me and has allowed me to kind of succeed how I have, because I think it would be really challenging if I was on my own, or if I had a partner who was just like, no, I'm not doing that stuff. I'm not helping with the kids. I'm not, making dinner. I'm not giving them a bath, any of that stuff. So I'm very fortunate in that my husband, he cooks dinner every night. That's great. I can't remember last time I cooked. It was probably like toast. But so it's, having a partner where it's a team is great.
Okay. So this will be my last question. We'll get to Brandy and Cheryl for one more after this. But when I hear you talk, Lauren, I see a person, and I might be wrong, but if you work for me, I would be a person saying, hey, slow down a little bit. You're moving too fast for me. And a lot of people are, hey, I got to drag you up to my speed. You're driving me crazy. Nothing's getting done, which would drive all four of us very crazy in that. So my question is what gives you that drive? What is it that drives you to the excellence that I read into you, Lauren? What is that? What's the driving force?
Oh man, that is such a good question. I love being, I just like being successful, right? I like being the best at things, which probably sometimes is not a great trait to have, because we can't be the best at everything, right? This is a lesson I'm trying to teach my 7-year-old right now. It's hard to parent those, when you're basically parenting yourself, you're like, I haven't learned how to do this, and now I'm expected to teach a child. But I think that, I am so driven to just be really, really good at what I do. And I also really value feeling like I'm contributing. And so being able to add value, being able to help, being able to make things better, those things make me feel good, like personally. Like, I love when I'm able to take something at Rooftop that's been super messed up and just be like, look, it's better. We have a process now. Like, it's such a good feeling. I'm making other people's lives easier, right? I'm making other people that work for the company, I'm making it better for them. And that makes me personally feel really, really good. So I think it's definitely a combination of a couple things. I am a little obsessive. I am a little bit of a perfectionist. So those things help. But I just really like helping people, I think, is what it boils down to.
Got you covered. And that was an excellent answer, because that's what we're looking for. Actually, in this world, we're looking for people with that kind of, I'm going to call it a can-do attitude, an attitude to make it better, those type of things. And I applaud you that you're able to do something, which is turn it off when it's time to be a mommy. So congratulations on that, because that's got to be a hard light switch to turn off at times.
It is.
So Brandy, what would be your last question for Lauren today?
Yeah, so it's a two-part. So the first is like, what are you listening to? What podcasts are you listening to? What books are you reading? What are you into right now? And then the second part is, what's next for Lauren? What's your next big goal?
Oh gosh, those are great questions. Okay, so I am one of those people. I am a big reader, but I have to have I have to have options. So I'm never just reading one book. I'm reading multiple books, and I have to have them available at all times. So like when I travel, people are like, "Why did you bring so many books with you?" I'm like, "What if I don't want to read the one that I brought? What if I want to read the other one?" So I'm reading this really, really great book right now that I'm so excited about. But I do have to look up the title and the author. It's called Scaling People, and it's about tactical management. Give me one. I'll have it in like 2 seconds. Um, Scaling People, Tactics for Management and Company Building. And it's by Claire Hughes Johnson. And I'd never heard of her before, but like she worked at Google, she worked at Stripe. And it's really it's not like your management 101 book. It's kind of like the next level. And I'm obsessed with it. Like I wish I had more time to read right now because it's literally all I want to be doing right now. There's different assessments in it. There's different little guides, little things you can fill out, and it's super, super good. And I actually had sent it to the two brothers, the owners, Dylan and Tristan, and then David, who I mentioned, he's the other member of our leadership team. And I sent it to them, I think, over the weekend. And I was like, we all have to read this book. We have to do Rooftop Book Club. Like this is happening because like this is what we need right now. This is where Rooftops at. We're at that next level, that's scaling the company, and that's where we're struggling, and like let's read it and we'll all get on the same page. So I'm reading that. I'm reading another book about chronotypes, and there's different chronotypes based on like your genetics as far as when's the best time to go to sleep, wake up, eat, exercise,
I'm the rare lion.
Yeah. I think I'm so stuck. I'm gonna have to like actually really invest some effort into figuring it out, because I go back and forth between, I think I'm a dolphin. Like I really struggle with sleep and being able to stay asleep. But then I also see other qualities in the other ones as well. But it is really good. It's been really helpful to like, my husband's definitely a wolf. Like he will stay up as late as he can. I'm not, I'm done. But so it's just been really great to read that and kind of learn more about maybe some things I could be doing differently to kind of hack my productivity, I guess. And then, gosh, what else? I don't know. As far as listening to podcasts, I need a good one right now. Like I've kind of hit that, like, what else can I listen to? So I would take some recommendations there.
I'll send you some recommendations because I'm a huge
I would love that. The only time I have found that I can actually listen to podcasts is if I'm like folding laundry or something like that. If I'm in the car, like I'm listening's not great with me. And so like if I'm in the car driving, I'll all of a sudden be like, I don't even know, maybe 5 minutes, because I just like zone out. But yeah, whenever I'm like folding laundry, I'm like, that's my podcast time.
And then what's your big goal? What's your next big goal?
Oh yeah. What's my next big goal? So I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed doing the seminar that I did at the NCSG convention. I was surprised that I was asked to do one. And so that was great. And it was a great experience for me. And I really, really loved it. And I was like, maybe this is why I originally, like when I went to college, was like, I could be a teacher because I do enjoy teaching at that level. But I think that, I love working for Rooftop. I'm here for the long haul with them and whatever new projects they can throw my way, which they always do. But I also would love to really maybe start looking into what I can do from a coaching or teaching perspective. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'd love to start being able to give back, even if I can start doing it a little bit more in our own company, right? Like my coworker, Melissa, who was one of our employees from Magic Sweep that is now, she's still with us. She had asked me about my presentation that I did at the convention. She's like, well, have you done this for our employees yet? And I was like, no, well, I need to. I'm getting ready to go do it for Brandy's. Like I got to do it for ours too. So I would love, even if it's just internally, like I would love to start doing more stuff like that.
Sounds like a winner.
Perfect.
So Cheryl, what will be your last question for? Let's call her Miss High S here. A bundle of energy. And so, what will be your last question, Cheryl?
Actually, it's just one. I need her to do a statement to the people that are out there. What would be your grain of advice to give to people if you just had to boxcar something all in one statement? What would that be?
Figure out what's important to you and find a way to be doing that in everything that you do. And I'm speaking, that's the end of my statement. I just did the boxcar thing, but because I am me and I'm blah, 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 blah. The next part of it that I'm going to say, the next part of it that I'm going to say is to what I'm specifically talking about is values, right? Like find out what your values are if you don't know what they are, and bring those into everything you do at work, at home, in your personal life, whatever. I think that's the way that you'll truly be happy in everything that you're doing. When you know those values and everything that you're doing is aligned with that.
Super, super. Well, Lauren, I want to really thank you. And I want you to also please pass along our gratitude to the Rooftop people for allowing you to do this with us today. You've told us a lot about how to get there. And it goes back again, how to become a rock star performer. And if you're listening to this, that's last hour, and you're an employer, perhaps you want to even play what you just heard to a prospective employee and say, that's what I'm looking for to come to work for me. I'm looking for someone who wants to move to the highest level, who wants to be with us for a career. I think you just spelled out, Lauren, a lot of things that a lot of employers are looking for this day, and where a lot of people are just throwing up their hands. So I've got someone here, someone you know. It is a Jeremy Turner. I presume you know who this fella is.
Oh yeah, that would be my husband, and then that picture with my two sweet girls, Finley and Reed. So that was very sweet. Thank you, Jeremy.
Well, Jeremy, I appreciate that, and I want to tell you something. I want to congratulate you because undoubtedly, I think that not only is Lauren a super person to be in the company, but I would say she's a super mommy also to boot. Brandy, Cheryl, would you agree with that from the mommy perspective?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, we appreciate you joining this week on the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. Join us every Friday. And next week, we got a special treat for you next week. Guess what it is? I'm not going to be here because I'm going to be doing a swap meeting. So this is all on the three of them next week. I don't know what they have planned, but they'll be on 12 noon Eastern time next Friday, and hopefully sharing the knowledge out there. The Chimney and Fireplace Success Network is sponsored by the CVC Success Group. Remember, our mission is to help you take your business dreams and turn them into your business realities. Reach out to us if we can help you accomplish that goal. And with that, thank you so much. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege.